Yeah, and it's having adults around who aren't fuckwits.
Half-finished lemonade tells
And a
me
lot of
all
people
I
don't have
need to
that.
know about yesterday. I'm back here again. I told myself I'd stay a while away.
Hi, welcome back. Berger and I had a chat the other day about the ostrich phase of the pandemic that we're in now, which is the one where we're on a public health and government level just sort of trying to ignore it and hope that it goes away. Bertrand Russell, the famous philosopher, said that we have to deal with the facts as they are and not as we wish them to be. And much as we may wish that there's not much COVID around and that it's no longer evolving and that people are not dying from it or getting long COVID from it, those things just aren't the facts. It's a strange schism to be dealing in a world where you understand that and yet you have to get on with life surrounded by people who don't understand it. So it's important that we keep drawing attention to the truth and also support one another through what is a very difficult phase. Over time, the evidence becomes undeniable. But in communities that are not vaccinating the very young and not doing things like monitoring wastewater, at least we can point to places like the USA that do those things, imperfect as they are. And we can continue to look after ourselves by masking when we're in crowded situations and continuing to test and isolate. But it is a lonely place to be, particularly if you're surrounded by those who just do not or do not want to understand that this is still a significant ongoing health problem. A bit like climate change in some levels, where our communities also ignoring much of those parameters as well. So we need to stay strong, stay focused on the science, stay supporting one another in a compassionate and empathetic manner, and occasionally we need to talk about nonsense and to take time out to de-stress by enjoying life as much as we can. And Berger and I had a little bit of a reflection on all of those things in this brief chat. So how are you, Berger?
All right.
What's been happening?
All right. I've been tearing around the countryside, doing various remote outback locums, which is always interesting.
Have you been flying yourself from place to place?
Yeah, quite convenient, flying from little town to little town. It's amazing how different they all are, actually. You don't quite kind of get the sense of that if you just pass through as a tourist, but they're all completely different.
And what's happening with the pandemic then? Things seem to be uh, increasingly ignored in terms of testing in the population, and we seem to be
Yeah,
getting between 4 and 5 waves every 12 months, but we're now trying to just kind of absorb them as business as usual. Is that a
yeah,
fair analysis?
I think so. I mean, I think, the intention of governments from fairly early on has come to fruition. We now have, pretty high level endemicity. It's pretty high background levels all the time with frequent peaks. Um,
Yeah.
the By not testing, that's concealed to a large extent, and the impact on vulnerable people, particularly hospital patients, anyone in hospital who catches it, with anywhere from an 8 to an 11% mortality, is being ignored. And so I think the calculus that this was an acceptable, that we needed to get to a position where there was an acceptable, in inverted commas, toll, we've got there. I mean, the question is who that toll is acceptable to. And we've seen some very strong information initiatives from governments around the world about how everybody's tired of masks. We've got to go back to normality. You know, status quo, situation normal, 2019, it's all over. That has been a very strong political a requirement for a political narrative. And we see the kind of resources devoted to creating and propagating that political narrative, which were not were not devoted and are not devoted to promoting the public health. So, you know, it's hard not to be disappointed. It's certainly been getting me down a bit recently. It's because we see this. I don't want to overstate it, but it does feel like the death of public health, or at least the aspiration to improve the public health year on year, simply because that is a good and humane thing to do. We're now in a situation where we just are managing for best economic outcome. And that's
Is it
depressing.
economic outcome, or is it popularity of elected officials that we're managing for? Because they're slightly different things, and I think that a lot of this is being led by branding. And the thing that surprises me about it all is that if you were to adopt all of these current measures, but actually be fairly aggressive in your public health settings in terms of clean air, vaccination, antiviral availability, and surveillance of wastewater, to have at least a sense of how much disease is out there if you're not going to be testing people, then I don't think that would detract from politicians' popularity, because it seemed to me that the ones who improved their popularity were those who had a sense of protecting the general population. And I would have thought the smart way would be to thread the needle and do those things. But it seems like we're adopting the worst of the UK approach at the moment, which is to sort of pretend that infection is a good way of protecting people against infection, which is about as smart as saying, the more you spend at a 50% off sale, the more money you're going to have.
Yeah.
So I think that it comes back to medicine being politics and politics being public health at the moment, and people are afraid to fight against that because their careers depend on their acceptance by the political masters.
Yes, and ultimately, this comes down to, I think, a lack of courage, vision, and the ability to inspire in politicians. Because yes, I mean, the message that you're giving there, combining good public health with the best economic outcome. I mean, it's obvious that over the long term, that is the best thing to do, that healthy economies require healthy people. But the short-term interests, the quarterly, the interests that are watching the quarterly balance sheet, the quarterly profit, do not think like that.
So, but I suppose on the good news front, my assessment is that the vaccines are pretty good in most respects, and certainly a lot better than we anticipated early in the pandemic, and that masking, strategic masking in particular, you can lead a pretty good life.
Yeah.
Whilst still protecting yourself. I mean, as far as I know, I haven't had COVID to date, and part of that is because I'm lucky with where I work and I'm privileged with my living conditions and so on. But I still will wear a decent mask when I feel I'm in a crowded situation. When I travel, I went to the UK for work and for family reasons for a week. About a week ago, I came back. And I masked the whole time I was in the airport and on the aeroplane, except to eat and drink something at altitude.
Yep.
And didn't catch so much as a sniffle while those around me were trying to cough up a lung, apparently, most of the way home. So even if there was no COVID, you wouldn't care. There's some good news for personal protection in the midst of the new world regime, I think.
Definitely. And listen, that's the thing. One of the things that really galls me about this whole situation is we've learned a lot since 2019. Okay, we don't want to go back to 2019. I used to get ill all the time particularly when I worked in general practice, a bit less so when I
Of
worked
course,
in
yeah.
hospital medicine, but still, I used to get ill all the time. I haven't been ill in 4 years. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I do not understand why we are not adopting the highest level of respiratory protections in hospitals now that we've all actually figured out that for years we've been ignoring and neglecting the evidence on airborne transmission of respiratory and other illnesses. It's a mystery to me why hospitals and hospital systems are tolerating such high levels of staff sickness. And the levels of staff sickness are very high, not just with COVID, also with flu, also with RSV. People are off all the time uh, uh, when that could be dramatically reduced, and quite why we are tolerating infecting already sick patients with these diseases is absolutely beyond me. So exactly what you say.
Well,
We've
it's
learned a
because
lot.
it's like the military. It's like the military. There's a chain of command, and there's a section that deals with certain things,
Yeah, I
and
know.
we have a failed infection prevention control system
Totally
in
failed.
place at the moment.
Yeah.
That's based on nothing better than religious beliefs
Yes.
and ego and being part of a team, which
Yeah.
is on any objective measure failed us dramatically,
Yeah.
and continues to fail us in the hospital setting.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that will continue for the long haul, but unfortunately these things take a depressingly long time to turn around because there's a lot of people who need to move on from their positions
Yes.
before honesty will be allowed to prevail, in my view, as to airborne transmission within healthcare facilities. There might be individuals here and there who get it, but if you want to change something, it has to come from the top down, and CEOs have to follow the advice that they get from the experts in that area. We
Yeah.
would expect them to do so in anesthesia and surgery and in emergency medicine. And so likewise they do in infection prevention and control. But when we have an audit and they come in and they're checking
Yeah.
very carefully whether we're washing our hands in a stuffy little room,
It's
whilst
nonsense.
whilst I'm wearing a mask and
Yeah.
the people doing the audit are not, then what can you expect? The emperor has no clothes.
Now, what we all want for ourselves and for our families is to be cared for. The reality is that the approach,
I hope so.
you hope, and the approach to the pandemic is much more on the side of farming humans for profit than it is caring for individual humans. So the rhetoric.
Well, I think so. When you see the usual talking heads coming out and saying it's important this inquiry it discusses whether our response was proportionate. Well, proportionate to what? I mean,
Yes.
you're either is our response to saving lives proportionate? Well, we sent the Navy to get one solo sailor out of the Southern Ocean at one
Yes.
stage.
Tony Bullimore.
Tony Bullimore, when he was trapped down there, was that proportionate? We spend billions on chemotherapy
Yes.
every year for people who will die from their cancer at some stage. Is that proportionate? We spend billions on running large public hospitals to treat people with advanced stage disease of all descriptions, including dialysis, transplantation. Is that proportionate? Nothing was disproportionate about our pandemic response.
No.
That is how you respond to it. But if you go into it saying, well, we've got to accept that a whole lot of people are going to die,
Yes.
then that to me is a fundamentally corrupt ethical position to take, because it's corrupt because it's not what you would want for yourself or your loved ones.
Yeah.
If it was your own children, your own partner or family, you wouldn't just say, oh, well, that's okay. Somebody has to die during a pandemic. Now, if we were all just struggling to get by and survive as a community, then, that a few hundred years ago, then that would be the state we were in. But we're not. You can't possibly say that it's reasonable for people to live the lifestyle that we have here and yet not look after
Yes.
our elderly people or our people who have an increased vulnerability to disease. It's an untenable position and one that we should attack whenever possible.
Absolutely, and that paradox of being such a wealthy nation with such a high standard of living, and at the same time,
Yes.
penny pinching and going, oh well, no, we can't afford this. It's just absolute bollocks. I mean, and
We're
at the
wealthy
same,
enough that we can afford the ridiculous discretionary products that are advertised
Absolutely.
between ridiculous discretionary breakfast television segments.
Yeah.
So I think that it's very reasonable for us to fight
Yeah.
about these things and to continue to make that commentary and to call people out on it, because I can tell you this, they don't like it.
No, they don't
They
like
really
it.
do not like it. But I would say that it's a fallacy to say that the life of the 90-year-old is not worth as much as that of the 20-year-old.
Completely.
Because we're not saying let's abandon the 20-year-old. What we're saying is maybe we're going to ask that 20-year-old if they wouldn't mind wearing a mask when they're in a nursing home.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to ask that 20-year-old, would they please wear a mask up if they're going onto an oncology ward?
But what an
We're not
imposition.
saying that we're going to kill 20-year-olds instead of 90-year-olds.
Yeah.
We're saying that it's perfectly reasonable to take small steps in order to protect elderly people so that they can stay alive. We
Yeah.
shouldn't wantonly be letting them die because they're 90. What we're really talking about is quality life years, and we're also talking about level of the attitude of that particular person, and these are things that we look at in medicine all the time. If there's a 20-year-old with a terminal disease whose quality of life is terrible, who says, I want to give up now, we in fact have in place even voluntary assisted dying around the country for those people. So we're not saying life at any cost, but what we're saying is let's be a just
Yes.
society, a moral society, a good society, a caring society, an empathetic society, not one that just writes off large bits of the population so that the rest of us can carry on blithely
Yes.
without any consideration, even the most minor alteration in what we do. And
Which
this
now labels you-
disingenuous and false premise, it needs to be countered.
And saying that now labels you as an extremist. It's not. It's extremist to apparently request, as you say, that the 20-year-old wears a mask in a nursing home when they go to visit grandma. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's this kind of infantilization of adults, actually. That you can't expect the poor loves to do this. You know, what happened to compassion? What happened to care for others? That's what distresses me.
Yep.
And I find it particularly distressing, actually, as an immigrant to Australia, because this country, the ethos of this country is looking after your mateship.
I'm not sure that.
Well,
I'm not sure that
it's
the
the
stereotype
narrative,
was
isn't
ever
it?
really that solid.
But there was Australians are quite civic minded. They like to do that kind of stuff. There was a narrative that could have been explored and promoted in the pandemic, and it was to start with, and everybody around the country was going, oh yeah, go Victoria, thanks very much for doing this for us. But then there was a shift, and it just went bang like that, and now it's all about lockdowns have ruined children's education forever, including in Western Australia where there weren't any lockdowns, etc., 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 and the poor loves. Totally evidence-free.
Well, I think it's it's worth keeping these things at the forefront of mind and keep putting them on record. Particularly this issue of understanding how much disease there is around. I think we need to be monitoring that a lot more carefully.
Yep.
And in the end, obvious reality becomes it's still, these people will still deny anything, but the sensible heads will start to prevail, and there'll be change in some of these positions. And I'm optimistic that
I think they will.
In the long term we'll get somewhere, but in the meantime that'll be too late for some, which is a very difficult thing to live in society. But I suppose it then makes it equivalent to many of the other things we live with in society, where we've had unfair health outcomes in lots of ways.
Yeah.
What is the rest of your week?
Well, we shall keep buggering on and being a thorn in the side of everybody who wants to treat us humans as an economic commodity to be farmed. But the rest of the week,
I agree.
I'm very excited because I'm going to New Zealand on Saturday. Actually going to do a emergency trauma medicine course in Christchurch, which I've done before a couple of years ago. It's actually the best one. So it's called the ETM course. It's one of the alphabet courses: ALS, APLS, EMST, ETM, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's a really good course. So it's about how to deal with trauma patients. And then, so as you know, Andrew, my weakness is
it's arriving, is it?
Quirky aircraft. So this aircraft that I bought from a friend in America, 1946 Republic CV amphibious flying boat, is assembled.
Sorry, I thought I misheard you. I thought you said it was built in 1946.
1946. Yeah, they were built in 1946, 1947. They were going to revolutionize the process of aircraft construction and be very, very cheap to build. And the returning pilots from the war were all going to buy them and fly their families around at the weekend. It never eventuated, but they did produce what is probably the best single-engined amphibious flying boat ever produced, which may not mean a lot to many people listening to this. But anyway,
New Zealand's got a lot of water you could land it on if you need to.
Got a lot of lakes. So I'm going to be flying it down to the Southern Lake Country. Hopefully, I have never flown it before, but hey, how hard can it be?
I don't know anything about that, nor do I know anything about what it is that I'm embarking on this week.
Oh yeah, go on.
And well, you're talking about if you needed an evidence base to do things,
yes.
you would never get anything done, in the end. So that's the human way. No, I'm getting married on Thursday.
Yes, you invited us. You invited us, and we couldn't come.
Well, this is, that's there's a bit of a party later in the year,
nice.
But this is the actual.
This is the actual. Okay.
Heading down to the registry office.
Well, congratulations.
Congratulations. Well, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, fair enough.
But it will be
fair
enough. It'll be a happy occasion with family only this week, and my 96-year-old mother, no doubt, making comments like "This will never last," that sort of thing, from the front row, which is
fantastic.
Things she likes to say to impress strangers. And scare the celebrant on this occasion. Well, it's good to talk to you. As always.
Great to talk.
And keep flying the flag. And we need to put in a bit of video in here of your flight of the Bumblebee.
Flight of the Bumblebee. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Very excited. Anyway, great to talk to you, Andrew, as ever.
As ever.
Half-finished lemonade tells me all I need to know about yesterday. I'm back here again. I told myself I'd stay a while away. Solutions ahead, but don't carry on. Blinded by nothing, the way through it all. Hold on to the dark. There's a grace in the fire and the flames. Thoughts drift too far. In this room I've lost my way.